I'm Scott Weichel. You're listening to My Kind of Country right here on Fish Creek Radio. My guest tonight is an American country music artist, and he released his self-titled debut album back in 1994. And anybody that knows good country music knows that song, Jukebox Junkie. It was a top 10 country hit for him, and he had several more fantastic albums and charted 6 more singles on the country charts. And he's currently on the Taking the Country Back tour with Sammy Sadler. It's my honor to welcome Ken Mellons to My Kind of Country. Ken, how are you today?
Scott, I'm doing great, buddy. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. I really do appreciate it. Well, we were talking a little bit on the air, or before we got on the air, about the state of country music, and you personify what we're all about here at My Kind of Country. You're keeping it real country, my friend, and I applaud you for it.
Well, I appreciate that, Scott. I've always tried my best to stay true to my country roots. As we were talking off the air, bluegrass was my first introduction to any kind of music as a little boy growing up in Nashville, and then I got into more traditional country music, pedal steel guitar and fiddle with Jones and Lefty Frizzell, Keith Whitley and Vern Gosdin, some of those guys that were huge influences on me. But when we went in to make our first record, I guess we made it probably around 1992 before it came out in '94. One of my big things with the record label at the time with Sony, I just said, I'm a traditional country singer. Honky-tonk country music's what I do, and that's what I want my records to be. And, we went in and made two records with them, and next thing you know, they're coming to me saying, hey, we want to do a third album on you, but we want to change directions. And, then I switched record labels, and I went over to Curb after I'd been at Sony, and I thought I was leaving a bad situation for better, and I signed with Mike Curb over at Curb Records, and we went in and made a record, and they didn't even put it out. With the A&R people they had at the time, it was kind of the same thing, just too country. And, I don't know. I couldn't go pop if I had a mouthful of firecrackers. What you see is what you get with me, and I don't understand why we still can't have traditional country music today. As you were talking about how many listeners that you've got listening to your show, obviously there's people out there that want to hear traditional country music. And I think what I said, 20 years ago, when I could tell that, where country music was going then, I said, they ought to split the charts and have a traditional country chart and then a pop country chart. But I guess, they decided not to go that route. They decided just to go with what they're doing now, which, I guess it's like anything. Juicy fruit was the only flavored gum you had. You'd get tired of it after a while. You'd want something else. But yeah. I still feel like there's room for traditional country music out there. And as long as I'm able to, sing and tour and write songs, that's what I'm going to do is real country music.
Well, amen to that, and I applaud you for it. And there's a lot of people that are doing that, and there's a lot of new artists coming up through the ranks that are doing traditional country. And you got people like Mo Pitney and Amber Digby. There's a lot of them, and they've been on my show. And it's very interesting to me to talk to these younger people because they're presenting this music to their peers. And a lot of their, the younger listeners are expecting to hear, Taylor Swift or whatever, but they're hearing George Jones, and they're like, well, this is pretty cool stuff, and they're discovering it. And as I'm sure you're finding out, the internet and the social media, that's on the internet is helping that a lot, and it's making people aware of that there's some really good music out there.
Well, it really is, Scott, and I think right now in today's world that we live in, that's where it's at, social media. The days of selling hard copy CDs in record stores are just about over. The only place that we sell hard copy CDs are at live shows. And,
sure.
We sell downloads on our website. Excuse me, I've been battling a head and chest cold for the last few days, but that's really where it's at in social media. And you mentioned, Mo Pitney a few minutes ago, and I had the pleasure of meeting Mo several years back. I was actually at the station inn, and him and his dad came by the table I was sitting at and said that, they were big fans of my music, and if there was any advice, about the music industry, what could I give them? Excuse me, sorry about that. And I told him, I said, do you write songs? And Mo said, yeah. And I said, well, that's where the money's at, is songwriting and publishing. And I said, being a country music star and touring all over the world, I know that's a lot of artists, that's their dream, and that's what they want to do. But the money is in songwriting and publishing. And if you can write songs and have some part of your publishing, then that's, how you're really going to make, your money. And I said, you got to think about when you're on the road how much overhead you're paying out with your bus and fuel and driver and band and hotels and food, etc. So that was really probably about the best advice I could give Mo. But I'm a big fan of his music, and I do agree with you. I think that he's one of the fresher things that I've heard in a long time, and I wish him all the success because we need more of that. We need more young, great singers, male and female, out there, that are doing traditional country music to help, carry on that tradition.
You're absolutely right, and there's more of them coming out. You were talking about the charts and things, and there's a lot of independent charts out there that are focusing more on the traditional country, and that's kind of where we're focusing too. But I found it very interesting that Merle Haggard and Willie Nelson have a new duets album out, and it debuted at #1 on the Billboard charts, and that's with no major radio airplay. And I thought that was that said something right there.
Well, it speaks volumes, and like once again we were talking off air. All the great legends, like George Jones and Johnny Paycheck and Conway Twitty and Vernon Gosden and some of those guys. Excuse me, I'm so sorry.
No
and Keith Whitley and guys like that are no longer with us. Haggard and Willie Nelson are the only two left, just about, and it just says a lot. For them to go in and make a record and it to debut #1, that tells you something right there. That once again, the people that love traditional country music did not fall off the face of the earth. They're still out there and they want to hear it, and they'll do whatever it takes to find it. You just got to figure out a way to get it to them. And once again, social media is where everything is right now.
Amen. Amen. Well, I want to go back to the days of Jukebox Junkie, and a lot of folks that they see entertainers and they think they just they magically become stars and everything just comes up roses. Tell me a little bit about the time leading up to that song coming out.
Well, I grew up in a little suburb of Nashville. I'm from East Tennessee. Kingsport, Tennessee is where I was born, but we moved to Hermitage when I was 3 years old. So grew up right outside of Nashville, and my mom and dad would take me to, the Grand Ole Opry, obviously, and a lot of country music and bluegrass concerts. And so I was pretty much showered with a lot of great music growing up. And, of course, at 4 or 5 years old, I pretty much knew what I wanted to do, not really knowing that I had any kind of talent. Obviously, I guess they thought I did because I was their son. But, once I graduated high school, I went to them and told them that, I didn't really want to go to college. And so I got me a job, and I was sacking groceries during the day, and at night I was hitting every local honky-tonk that I could, find or where they'd let me get up and sing. And, of course, about 15 years later, that's when I got my first record deal with Sony. So there was a lot of paying my dues, so to speak, for many years. But, I worked at Opryland at a show called Country Music USA for 4 years, and that was a great experience, and got to work out there with a lot of talented people. But, yeah, I mean, it was not an overnight success by any means, but, the songwriting in was something that, I started doing and hooked up with Jerry Cupid, who produced my first 2 records for Sony, and we wrote a lot of songs together. And he put me with some great songwriters as well. And now through the years, I've been fortunate and blessed to be able to write with some great writers. But before Jukebox Junkie came out, that's kind of what I was doing. I was beating the streets and writing songs and trying to get somebody to discover me, I guess, is what everybody that comes to Nashville or lives in Nashville, wants to do is to get that record deal.
Well, you had a career song right out of the gate. Your first big song, and to this day, I still get requests for Jukebox Junkie, and everybody, as soon as you say it, they're like, "Oh, that's Ken Mellons." That became a household phrase.
Well, thank you, man. You know, it was one of those songs that when me and Jerry sat down and started writing it, you know, we both, you know, never probably would have dreamed that, you know, it would have been the record that it was. But, you know, we played it for Sony, and actually RCA had offered me a record deal before I signed with Sony. We played it for RCA, and they loved it, and then we played it for Sony, and then, of course, we ended up signing with Sony. And they put it out as a second single, and we were out on tour with Billy Ray Cyrus that summer of 1994, and it had been out at radio for maybe a couple of months, and, you know, opening up for Billy Ray. Of course, we were getting in front of a lot of people, and, you know, when we would go into the, you know, we always ended our show with Junkie, obviously, and then we would go into the intro with the crowd would just erupt and go crazy, and you know, that told us right there that we had a hit record, and it's still today. You know, obviously it's the biggest record I ever had, but it's still today the gift that keeps on giving for me. As I said earlier about, you know, the songwriting end of things. You know, when you write songs that are, you know, that big and big hit records and been played over 1 million times at radio and that kind of thing, then, you know, you're fortunate to reap those benefits for many years. And when I'm dead and gone, you know, hopefully my 2 sons and my wife will be able to you know, continue reaping the benefits.
Amen. Amen. Well, one of my favorite songs back then was called "I Can Bring Her Back." Tell me a little bit about that one.
One of my favorite songs I've ever written and recorded, if not my all-time favorite. I wrote that with Dale Dotson and Gene Simmons, and that's not Gene Simmons of Kiss, but another Gene Simmons who has passed away now. Gene had a big hit years ago called "Haunted House" that John Anderson actually had a cut on.
Oh, yeah.
And Gene also wrote "Indian Outlaw" for Tim McGraw. But Gene was a great songwriter, and we wrote a lot back during that time. But me and Dale Dotson actually met each other when we were working at Opryland, and we started writing songs back then, and we just developed that click that, you know, every time we would sit down to write, we usually wrote a pretty good song. And I think on that first album, we wrote quite a few things together on that project. And, of course, "I Can Bring Her Back" was one of them. And how we got the idea to write the song, I was over at Dale's apartment one morning, and we were sitting in his kitchen there drinking coffee, and Dale was talking about this girl that he had fell in love with years and years ago back in Berkeley Springs, West Virginia. And he said, you know, sometimes I think about her, and I think about, you know, just wanting to relive all those memories and go back in time and everything. And I looked at him and I said, well, you can bring her back anytime you want to, but only in your mind. And we, right there, we knew that we had a great hook, and we started writing on it. And that evening we had a writing session with Gene Simmons, and so we finished it up. And, of course, it ended up being on that first album and was our 3rd single. And still today, one of my most requested songs. You know, obviously people know me for Jukebox Junkie, but if you're a huge Ken Mellons fan, "I Can Bring Her Back's probably, you know, one of your favorite songs by me. And it's, you know, like I said, even today when we do our live shows, you know, we get 3 or 4 songs into the set, people are hollering out "I Can Bring Her Back." So it's definitely a special song to me, and probably my favorite song I've ever written and recorded.
That's a great one. That's one of my favorites, too. And, of course, Rub-a-Dubbin' and Looking in the Same Direction, that's another one I like. And you've got, I'll tell you what, you go to your website, it's kenmellons.net, and you've got a whole bunch of songs that folks can download. They're only 99 cents a piece. And your country project, you got some fabulous songs on there. You still have great material, and that's one of the things that I believe sets you apart in addition to a great voice. But you got some of the best material out there. And one of the favorite songs I have been playing the heck out of on my show is "Institute of Honky Tonks" with George Jones. Tell me about that one.
Well, I tell you, that was a special moment. I got to start touring with George about 1995. We did several shows together. First show was down in Tampa, Florida, at the Florida State Fair. And I developed a friendship and a relationship with George and, of course, his wife, Nancy. And me and John Northrup and Larry Alderman had wrote that song for George. And I sent it over to Nancy, and she called me back and said, George wants you to cut it with him and do a duet. And so that was even more special. And so we got to go in and record that together and had such a great time. And funny story about George, when we were in the studio cutting the vocals on it, he kept looking at his watch every 5 minutes when we were in there putting the vocal down. And I finally asked him, I said, George, I said, do you have to be somewhere? And he said, Matlock comes on at 3 o'clock. So he was a huge Matlock fan, and I knew then that we might ought to try to hurry up and get it done so we can get him home to watch Matlock. But, George was such an icon and a big influence on me, and that was actually the second song that he had sang with me on. He sang on a song that was on our second album called He'll Never Be a Lawyer Because He Can't Pass the Bar, and him and John Anderson came in and sang with me on that. But the duet with George for the Institute of Honky Tonks, very special, very special. I mean, I just can't say enough great things about George and Nancy, and I miss George dearly, and what a big influence he was on my music and my career, and his music will live on forever.
Well, it certainly shows, and a lot of the songs you've written, and of course your vocal style too. You definitely are cut from that same cloth, without a doubt.
Well, I tell you, Scott, like I said earlier, Vern Gosdin, George Jones, and Keith Whitley, and those guys were huge influences on me musically. And of course, as I got a little bit older into high school, I started discovering John Anderson and Hank Williams Jr. and a lot of other guys that were major influences on me in my music. But the core of my music was definitely from Jones and Whitley and Gosden. Those three guys were probably the ones that molded my music. And when I'd sit down to try to write a song, I would try to write something to say, well, what would Keith Whitley say, or what would Vern Gosden say, or what would George Jones say, or how would they phrase this line, or whatever. And I think that when you listen to those guys and the way that they sing with so much feeling and emotion, that's what drew me to their music. Was when I sit down to listen to one of their songs, I would stop everything I was doing and just sink into that song and listen to what they were saying, and I was believing every word they were telling me. And that's today, that's just not when I turn on the radio, that's not what I'm hearing. I'm not hearing singers that sing with that believable feeling and emotion that you're believing everything they're saying.
Amen. Well, you got some. You used some pretty good clay to form your molds there.
Well, I tell you, man, I've been very fortunate and blessed. God has really, blessed me in more ways than I deserve. A beautiful wife and two beautiful sons, and of course my music career, and we're still out there today, beating up the road. And me and Sammy Sadler started this tour about a year ago, and we've, just hung in there with it, and we're just building it. And we decided to call it Taking the Country Back, because that's what it is. We're trying to, take back country music to where people still want to hear real country music and traditional country music, and there's still some honky tonks out there and some places that people want to hear that kind of stuff. And so we're climbing on the bus and going out there and strapping it on them.
Well, that's great. Well, folks, make sure you go to kenmellons.net, and you've got a page on there with all the tour dates. You got a bunch of tour dates coming up, and that's fantastic, including one in Michigan, right?
We are, actually, Scott. We're going to be in Michigan this coming Saturday night. We'll be there. Excuse me. We'll be there at the Iona Fair there. I guess that's the county fair there in Iona, Michigan. And me and Sammy will be there with all the boys in the band, and we're looking forward to it. It's been a while since we were in Michigan. I think last November was the last time we were up there in several parts of Michigan there, so it'd be good to get back. And looking forward to the show, and a lot of fans up in that part of the country, and they're great country music fans in the state of Michigan.
Yes, you do. Excuse me. And we're going to keep playing it right on our station, I can guarantee you that. I did want to mention there's a lady out of Texas. Her name is Myra Rowland, and she was on my show recently, and she did a fantastic version of Institute of Honky Tonks.
Well, awesome. Anytime somebody wants to cover that stuff, tell them to feel free, I mean, that's great that there's people out there that are, singing those songs. And I've had a young lady, I think her name is Jade Jack or Jade Michelle Jack, or she just married Doug Stone, and I think she just recorded "I Can Bring Her Back" on her latest album. And so when you're getting these younger artists out there that are cutting your songs, you know, man, that's a good feeling, and we appreciate that.
Absolutely. Well, it's when you have good music, you know, you're going to get some people that want to record it, and you certainly have a whole catalog of fantastic music, and we're going to keep playing it. And I hope your tour continues to go well, and we look forward always to hearing from you.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate you taking your time out and doing an interview. I want to thank all the listeners for the support now through the years. It means a lot to us, and we're just going to keep on climbing on the tour bus and doing shows and keep writing songs and keep making records. And as long as they keep buying it and keep liking it, then we'll keep doing it.
Hey, that's fantastic, man. Well, we're going to play one of your songs right now, Ken, and I'm going to let you play DJ and tell me which song you want us to play.
Wow, that's tough. You know, we talked about "I Can Bring Her Back." Obviously, you know, Jukebox Junkie is the one that most people know me from. But, you know, "I Can Bring Her Back," if I was going to take one song that I'd recorded, I'd probably say, and if you didn't know who Ken Mellons was, I would say, let me introduce you to Ken Mellons, and I would play "I Can Bring Her Back."
All right, folks. Well, if you don't know who Ken Mellons is, you're probably listening to the wrong program. But anyway, we're going to introduce you to him right now. Here's "I Can Bring Her Back" from Mr. Ken Mellons as My Kind of Country continues right here on Fish Creek Radio. Thank you again, Ken, for being on the show.
My pleasure.